Any questions, remarks, notes? The floor is yours. Yes.
Sorry. I have a question about the accommodations you mentioned earlier. Because if a student has, maybe you said 7 minutes on, then take a small break. How do you make that function in a general ed classroom without creating an unhealthy dynamic with the students who don't need that?
I'll take a crack at that, actually, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and partly, certainly if you're teaching in a virtual setting or a blended setting, the ability to adapt individually to kids without impacting the rest of the kids is kind of baked in to the system. But I think teachers do this already, right? You know, whether they're literally grouping kids together or have a sense of like clusters of students who need various things. It's very rarely like the one kid that needs to take a regular break. There's probably a cluster of kids that would do better to work in smaller bursts, and then do that station rotation that you can do in a blended setting. And the same thing with use of music, use of visual versus auditory stimuli, and so on. I think what we already know is that a student that has a diagnosis of ADHD and is in an inclusive classroom, they're not in a pull-out setting, but are in a regular classroom, we already have to dealing with that student somewhat differently than everybody else in the class. Sometimes they'll have an aid, sometimes they have medication, sometimes there are other things. But I think what I'm imagining is they're not alone anymore. Actually, they have 29 peers or 30 peers that are processing things maybe slightly differently from them, but they're not the only one that has a different, is somewhere on that attention continuum. So does that make sense? As opposed to like saying, Johnny, you have to change things every 7 minutes. The rest of us are going to hang out for a half an hour on this lesson. I don't think that's the way classrooms typically will work now anyway. Even the most traditional ones, differentiation is kind of the name of the game. And that's typically in small groups as opposed to individual in a face-to-face class.
Yeah, just to add, I think, in the classic legal policy answer I'm going to give you, which is it depends, right? So that's an individual discussion. And so somewhere along the way, as that team, the IEP team or 504 team, we're going to have a moment of clarity to be able to say, okay, for this particular topic, for this subject area, for this need, we're going to have to find the right balance between content, expectation, and ability. And if we track down that road using all the information available, we might end up in a place where there's a healthy compromise with regards to expectation within the content. Maybe we don't add so much fluff because we do have to account for time and get down to the core requirements of the standard. But in other cases, we'll say that's not acceptable, and so now we are really looking at a need for specially designed situation because of the adverse effect that's being created by the attention-driven issues. And so we have to look at that kind of LRA continuum and begin to think about where we can make that transpire safely and effectively for the student.
I would just say one more thing. A lot of this really is educators demanding better from their content and curriculum providers, honestly.
Yeah.
The ability to be much more flexible about how you use content in your classroom. When all anybody had was printed books, it was a lot harder, but there's a lot of material that is available and a lot more that should be available that can be adapted really easily and really seamlessly for the attention, where you are on that attention continuum without feeling like less than. It really is just different. To the barricades.
I would also add something like challenge a little bit, but
good.
But, here we go.
But
it's the throwdown.
I would like to think of like what is the alternative,
right?
Because if you don't do that 7-minute break, the kid is going to turn off their brain, and it's going to like if you're in in-person education, they're going to start messing up the class. So you're going to have the break anyway. So, because that happens to us as well. And I spend a lot of the time telling the doctors that work with me, like, oh, we don't have time to do this, we don't have time to do that. And I say, well, you're doing something that takes longer anyway.
Right.
Like
No,
you don't
that's
do
fair.
rating scales, you don't do this, and then you have to see the kid more often. spend some time in the beginning, and then you're gonna save time later. But yeah, it is a challenge as well.
We could agree on that. We're good. We're good.
Yes, please.
So you were talking about teachers demanding more from some of these like digital content providers, and there's an entire show floor full of different companies offering different things. What our school uses right now is just really not getting the job done. The kids aren't engaged. The ones that do it, they just cheat their way through it. Are there any providers right now that you think are doing a good job in terms of maintaining attention and being engaging?
I'd have to-
Can I try to answer
Yeah,
this?
please, that would be great.
I take it from my EdTech head, you know, the one that was speaking with so many entrepreneurs, etc. At the end of the day, you are engaging the kids in some learning environment. And you have your curriculum guys, and you have your IT guys, and you have those learning design guys that are actually organizing the learning environment. I have not seen yet today even a single learning environment that is differentiated and adaptable. Now, many of us have iPhones, and you know, on iPhone you can say, remove change the contrast because I have, I'm sensitive to all the different emotions and stuff like that. I mean, you can set several things in accessibility in order to adapt it better to you. So we need to start asking or demanding from those that are actually creating the learning environments to design less to the average user. Because there is no average user. And when they design something, I mean, even if they will just give two toggles on the top, one that removes unnecessary distractions visually, and the one that removes unnecessary pop-ups to come in. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know about you, I mean, I just know that me and my wife, we have different experience on Safari, okay? She likes all the pop-up and all jumping advertising, etc. She doesn't even see them, and she even believes that it's giving her some benefit. And I work with all the ad blockers possible because I cannot stand it. So if you apply the same principle also to learning environments, I think it's about time that we ask them also to make them adaptable to different people with different attention profile. It's something that, you know, that we take it for granted when we watch Netflix, etc. That immediately when, if you really are binging, then immediately they give you the next chapter. They stop they don't go through the credentials, etc. Think about those LMSs that are giving you 5-minute videos. If they would have the wisdom to know that you are a person that needs 30-minute videos, and so they will chain them together without unnecessary pop-ups in between or unnecessary breaks or telling you, I'm now switching to the next episode. So maybe there are some adaptive systems. I have not seen them yet. So maybe you have another experience if you have seen some, but the way that I see them today, all of are creating the things for the average user, and none of us is average.
Yeah, and I think that honestly, I have a lot of optimism about platforms, right? Platforms and sort of the front end of how we get content delivered to us. Because in a way, content is exploding. You can have any kind of content that you want out there in the world, but how it's organized and experienced by you as a learner is something that right now you don't necessarily have a lot of control over, but technology actually allows you to have a lot of control over it. And so I guess I would start honestly with the sort of the platform and the app side of things, and then slot the content into it based on what it is that your kids need and want. Because they'll go out and find the stuff that works for them outside of school and do every day. That's why if you ask most people under the age of 21 how they learn to do something, it's not from school, it's from TikTok. So, you know, finding a way to harness that a little bit in our schools, I think is something that's within our power to do, and it's certainly within the power of technology to deliver.
I've done primarily online for the last decade or so, and I think the biggest challenge specifically in the online platform is we can do the instructional design and intentionality of how it's delivered, and I trust that process is going to work itself out. Eventually there's going to be several the barrier that we constantly have to cross is there's a point where we can't reach to a computer and make them engage. At some point, they're gonna have to do that. And so from now, I would say the big portion of our conversation is around setting a routine, daily schedule, and finding a way to be as functional as possible on your own, since you've chosen a platform where you have isolated yourself for the most part.
Yeah.
So getting back to your point about we want to approach this with intentionality, yet caution, and not be a bull in a china closet if we are able to develop these wonderful tools. And it clearly looks like that's where you all are headed with this. When would we get something perhaps in our hands that we could use to then also be able to take that step farther with the families and say, like you said, let's not use the word spectrum, but on that continuum, this is where you are, regardless of whether you're on 504 or IEP or not.
Yeah.
This is kind of where you're at to meet that continuum, but then you also have to choose to digest it in an intentional way. And that we can take that conversation, but how far are we away from you arming us with that information?
Well, I fully agree with you that there is this holy trinity: the teachers, the parents, and the kids. Okay, and in a ideal world, they all work in collaboration and speak the same language, and so on and so forth. And very often, I see one of the key benefits of our tool is by being external to the conversation between the teacher and the child. Okay? So when you're sitting now in a PTA session with the parent, and you say something as a teacher, they always have this voice in their head that says, oh, he really doesn't like my kid, or he has his own opinion, etc. But if you can put something on the table and say, here is something, different dials and graphs, etc., and let's discuss about it, okay? It's taking the conversation from the very, very personal level to a very professional level, where it puts all the three of you together, you, the child, and the parent, in a quest for finding the best solution for this specific child. And you say, okay, this circle over here is self-regulation. What does self-regulation mean? Is your ability to manage your time, your ability to set your own goals, and to be independent learner, etc. And over here we see that you are struggling a little bit. Let's work on that. How do you think we can work on that? This is already a game changer in my opinion. So I think that a large part of what we are doing, that's also my philosophy at Neurotech, and very much something that also says, we are trying to bring the data. But to bring it to you, but it's from this moment, it's you how to actually use the data, but we are trying to give you the data in such a way that in this case it will be a conversation open. It's not, we are not giving you the solutions. Trust me, I've been bumbled by so many companies telling me, put a ChatGPT button over there, we'll do everything for you, 25K, 30K, just push the button and we'll give recommendations. Okay, I don't think that this is what you need, okay? I think that what you need is to have this sometimes very scientific data that is unemotional, not judgmental, that you can actually use as a conversation starter without the other side thinking that you have something maybe a hidden agenda in this conversation. And at the end of the day, I mean, you are partners, okay? At the end of the day, we are providing the data, and together we make the change in the life of kids. We are an impact company. In 2023, we impacted the life of 160,000 kids around the world. That's how many tests that we have done around the world. So we are an impact company, but every test, I know that every test that we do, there is someone that is taking this test and doing something good with the child at the end of the day. And you hope that's going to be you.
I think it's the marriage of engagement, relationship, and a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because if a child's enjoying the engagement, they're more likely to come back. That's only established by the relationship. And if the relationship is informed in such a way that you understand the rhythm, the cycle, the dance, their likelihood of coming back and re-engaging authentically improves every time.
I guess I would just add, I don't know a parent on the planet that wouldn't love having a couple of additional tools to make sure that their kid is going to thrive.
Yeah.
And especially if it's not framed as there's something wrong with your kid, but instead, here are some places where some adaptive skills might really help them not struggle, but instead really enjoy school. I think that's catnip for parents. Whether they use it well or not is another story, but it definitely it's sort of like, we are all on the same team, and this is stuff that you can adapt to if you know what it is, and your kid will be happier, do better. I think that's what every parent is about.
And there's also like a component very important that you're mentioning, and I think I spent some time with the parents as well. And it's different for every child, and those are the organizational skills. So those are some things that you also have to train. You know, sometimes I had a PhD student who would open the screen, and she had every file on the on the screen, every single file, and I said, well, can you make any folders, or like you need some folders here, like these 100 articles are all about depression, let's put them together. And then I start cleaning this is much better. So every kid, if they don't have the self resilience to do it themselves, they're going to need training on that, and that's as important in the beginning. It's like setting the stage, and that's going to go a long way. If you detect that you can set it up, but then they just don't do it. Sometimes you have to see where the problem is.
It's a great question.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.